Let the annual debate begin. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has announced the nominees for the class of 2022, and this year's contenders may just be more polarizing than ever. Who will get in? Who will get snubbed? Let's roll on the Rock Hall 2022 style right now on Track by Track. Hey everybody, my name's Kyle, and this is Track by Track, music reviews, news, and commentary. Thanks for tuning in today, and if this is your first time here, please take a second to click subscribe so that you won't miss future reviews and more. Say what you want, good or bad, about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction process, but there's one thing I think we can all agree on. Each year's list of nominees is never less than interesting. 2022 is no exception. The 17 acts nominated this year have careers that span across 6 decades and represent perhaps the most stylistically diverse group we've seen in a long time. If you're placing bets on which acts will ultimately win the honor of induction in 2022, well, good luck with that. I'll share my predictions in a few minutes, but let me tell you, based on this year's eclectic selection, my confidence in my own Rock Hall prognostication has never been lower. So without further ado, here's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame nominees for induction into the class of 2022. Beck, Pat Benatar, Kate Bush, Devo, Duran Duran, Eminem, Eurythmics, Judas Priest, Fela Kuti, MC5, New York Dolls, Dolly Parton, Rage Against the Machine, Lionel Richie, Carly Simon, A Tribe Called Quest, and Dionne Warwick. Wow, I think it's safe to say that list has something for everyone to love or hate. Take your pick. First off, let's consider this year's list in comparison to last year. In 2021, there were 16 nominees, one less than we have in this year's group. Of those 16 acts, 7 ended up being inducted into the Rock Hall in 2021. Out of the remaining 9 acts, 6 have been nominated again in 2022. The 3 that didn't make the ballot again this year were first-time nominees Mary J. Blige and Iron Maiden, and 7-time nominee Chaka Khan. We should also note that while 7 of the 2021 nominated acts earned induction last year, one of them was put in not under the performer category, but rather for musical excellence. LL Cool J was on his 6th nomination last year when the Rock Hall opted to induct him in one of their ambiguous special award categories. Kind of ironic that he wasn't put in under the more prestigious performer category, considering how his performance at the induction ceremony was one of the best of the night. Still, I was happy to see these special categories being used to broaden the number of acts being inducted. Consider 2021 inductees Kraftwerk. Here is an act that, like LL Cool J, had been nominated 6 times previously, though not last year. Out of nowhere, in a manner of speaking, Kraftwerk were inducted in 2021 under the Early Influence category. Honestly, I find it hard to argue with that. And it makes me think that could be a route the Rock Hall could take to induct several of this year's nominees. Take Dolly Parton and Dionne Warwick, for example. Both of these women's musical careers began in the early 1960s. Parton's nomination is her first ever, while Warwick has now been nominated twice, including in 2021. Unquestionably, both of these acts have had an enormous influence on female performers and singer-songwriters for decades. I'd say that's especially true for Dolly Parton, whose deep influence certainly transcends genre. Then there's the MC5 and New York Dolls, with careers beginning in the 60s and 70s respectively. Both of these acts have had a big influence on rock and especially punk acts that came to follow. Infamous 2006 Rock Hall inductees, the Sex Pistols, definitely took inspiration from these acts, particularly New York Dolls. So I think there's potential for any of these 4 acts to get slotted in as early influences. Meanwhile, we have acts like Devo or Fela Kuti. Both acts were highly influential, but arguably far more so on their musical peers than on the listening public at large. I would imagine it would be hard for official Rock Hall voters to want to give up one of their 5 votes for the performer category to either of these acts. But what about the musical excellence category? Again, not a voting category. Those awards are selected by the nominating committee rather than by the members. So if you thought there was a lack of transparency in the voting, all bets are off when it comes to the other awards. Still, it would be great to see some of these acts get honored in a way that doesn't feel quite as much like it's a popularity contest. There's a bit of a caveat I should mention about the special categories, though, and that's that the honorees are not necessarily selected from the same year's nominees. In fact, it almost never happens, with LL Cool J being the rare exception. Remember, Kraftwerk were nominated 6 times in the past, but not in the year they were finally inducted in a special category. So if we're hoping for any of the acts I've just talked about to get into the Rock Hall that way, the odds are not in their favor this year. They'd actually have a better chance, it seems, in a year when they're not on the ballot. At any rate, considering the induction chances for Devo, Fela Kuti, MC5, New York Dolls, Dolly Parton, and Dionne Warwick, I don't actually think any of them have a particularly strong shot at being inducted in the performer category this year. In 2021, Fela Kuti did shockingly well in the fan vote, coming in second to Tina Turner. Speculation was that most of the votes were coming from his home country of Nigeria, which lifted him above competition like Foo Fighters and the Go-Go's, who were also in the top 5. I won't be surprised to see him be the beneficiary of a similar wave of support this year, but like in 2021, I don't see that translating into an actual induction. All right, let's talk about the first-timers, the acts that are enjoying their first Rock Hall nomination ever in 2022. There's 7 newbies on the ballot this year, including Beck, Duran Duran, Lionel Richie, A Tribe Called Quest, and the aforementioned Dolly Parton. Also nominated for the first time is Carly Simon, the act perhaps most likely to elicit a response of, wait, she hasn't been inducted yet? Hard to believe, it's true. But I tend to have that response about a lot of the nominees every year. But the big name we have to talk about is Eminem. 2022 marks not only his first Rock Hall nomination, but also his first year of eligibility. So I have to say that of all the acts on this year's ballot, Eminem was the only one I was 100% confident would be on the list. Far and away, he's been one of the biggest selling acts of the past 20 years, with popularity that transcends genre. That's an important distinction because let's call out the elephant in the room. He's a rap artist. That alone would be enough for many people to dismiss him for induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I get it. People complained about Jay-Z last year, as well as the Notorious B.I.G., Tupac, and others in previous years. My response to those complaints has always been that the Rock Hall has always kept the definition of rock and roll pretty wide open. R&B acts have been inducted since year 1. Rock itself evolved from R&B, just as rap has. In my mind, it all belongs in the same musical universe, at least in the way the Rock Hall has shaped it from the start. There will be some who will see Eminem and A Tribe Called Quest on this year's ballot and say, that's not rock and roll. To which I say, it's all rock and roll. As for those 2 acts, I think Eminem has a strong chance at being a first-year walk-on, like Jay-Z in 2021. In fact, I think his chances of being inducted in 2022 are even stronger than Jay-Z last year, who I didn't think would make the cut on his first nom. Meanwhile, I think that as much as A Tribe Called Quest is a widely respected and revered group, I just don't see them getting inducted this year. They're an act that I think needs to marinate a bit still before they're likely to garner enough widespread support from the voting members of the Rock Hall to earn an induction. Looking at the other first-time nominees, I'd say the same about Beck. He's wildly innovative, and I love his music. But I think he needs a little more time. He's still actively releasing new music, so I think he's got ample opportunity ahead of him to solidify his case for induction. Then there's Lionel Richie, who some may be surprised to see nominated without the Commodores. Honestly, I think solo is the right call here. I think he's had far more influence and success on his own, not to mention being a co-songwriter and organizer behind We Are the World. To that end, I could also see the Rock Hall putting him in with a special category like musical excellence or lifetime achievement. But how about Duran Duran? Here's an act I've talked about previously in my Rock Hall Snubs video. They've been eligible for induction for 15 years, and in my opinion, it is shocking that in that time they have never even been nominated before. They're long overdue for inclusion on the ballot, and I'd say they're a strong bet for induction this year. Following their recent documentary film and the release of their 15th studio album, I would be neither surprised nor disappointed to see them ride that wave right into the Rock Hall class of 2022. Moving on, let's talk about some of the repeat offenders, beginning with some of the acts that have seemingly carried over their nominations from 2021. We already talked about Devo, Fela Kuti, New York Dolls, and Dionne Warwick. Also nominated in both 2021 and now 2022 is alt-rock legends Rage Against the Machine. This band has just received their 4th nomination in 5 years, so clearly there's strong support for these guys. With such a consistent and concentrated series of nominations, I have a feeling this will be their year for induction. Then there's UK singer-songwriter Kate Bush. No doubt about it, Kate Bush has a passionate and loyal fan base. But the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has a tendency to skew pretty strongly toward acts that have been more successful in America. In the US, many would see her as a one-hit wonder, but Bush's popularity is far greater in the UK. Consequently, I don't see her getting in this year, or possibly ever, I hate to say. Next, we've got a pair of 80s hitmakers, both enjoying their 2nd nominations for the Rock Hall. The Eurythmics were previously nominated in 2018, and I'll concede that they are an act that definitely deserves some recognition for their contribution to the music of that decade in particular. But I feel like a nomination is about as far as that recognition needs to go. Meanwhile, Pat Benatar is also being honored with a 2nd nomination this year. Her name was mentioned a lot last year, as some felt the Go-Go's induction was somehow a snub on Pat Benatar. Well, maybe I can see that, but with other female rockers like the Go-Go's and Joan Jett already inducted, there could be a clearer path for Pat Benatar this year. I say the odds are in her favor. Finally, let's talk about metal. The Rock Hall has a long history of snubbing heavy metal acts, with Judas Priest now enjoying, so to speak, their 3rd nomination in an every other year pattern since 2018. In their off year in 2021, Iron Maiden got the obligatory heavy metal nomination, but not the win. Now look, you've heard me defending the inclusion of hip-hop and rap in the Rock Hall, but by God, I feel just as strongly about metal music. I don't like pitting one genre against another, but how can the Rock Hall not see how criminally neglected metal is in their annual inductions? I think the last metal act to join the Rock Hall was Metallica back in 2009, so come on, Rock Hall, make this the year of Judas Priest. All right, so as I said earlier, when it comes to me predicting who I think will win, so to speak, I found this year's ballot to be one of the most unpredictable in a long time. Last year, I picked 5 out of 6 correct. Pretty good, right? This year, I'm feeling a lot less confident, but I'll still give it a shot. And again, I'm not picking personal favorites here, nor am I saying who I think should be inducted. These are the acts that I think the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame members will end up voting into the class of 2022, starting with Pat Benatar, Eminem, Duran Duran, Judas Priest, Rage Against the Machine, and Carly Simon. Of those 6 acts, the only one I think is a sure thing is Eminem. Rage is also a pretty safe bet, in my opinion. I think Pat Benatar and Duran Duran are both deserving and have a strong chance for induction, and Judas Priest is a coin toss as to whether the Rock Hall will continue to ignore metal music or not. And I have to admit, Carly Simon is a wild card for me. I could easily be swayed to swap her for Lionel Richie here. I'll also predict that any special award categories handed out this year will be dominated by female or African American acts in an effort to increase the diversity of the class of 2022. And with that in mind, I'll predict Chaka Khan will be inducted for the Musical Excellence Award, avoiding the need for a 7th nomination sometime in the next year or two. Now, if you want to make your voice heard, be sure to participate in the online fan vote. You can find that at vote.rockhall.com. Votes will be accepted daily through April 29th, and the top 5 vote earners will go on the official fan ballot to be tallied with the member vote. The final list of the 2022 Rock Hall inductees will be announced in May, and the live induction ceremony will take place later this year, likely in October, with a broadcast on HBO and HBO Max in November. Meanwhile, what are your thoughts on this year's list of nominees? Is there anyone you think has a lock on being inducted? Or are there acts you don't think quite deserve the honor? Who is an act that got snubbed this year that you think should be on the ballot? How do you feel about rap and hip hop and country going into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? And are you one of those who thinks the whole thing is just a sham anyway? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. Once again, my name's Kyle, and this has been Track by Track. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Plus, check out some of these other videos below that I think you might also enjoy. And of course, be sure to subscribe, because true music fans always want new releases the day they come out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.